I still remember the exact moment the shift began, the moment the air in the room changed, the moment my mom's voice became something sharp instead of soft. I was 32, sitting at the dining table with my elbows propped up, half listening to my mom explain her final wishes while poking at a slice of lemon cake she'd baked for the occasion. A family meeting, she called it. Very serious, very formal, and yet she served cake. I should have known something was off when she asked all of us to sit down after dinner like we were a board of directors instead of a family. My name's Craig, and I'm the youngest son. Still am, I guess. That night just made it obvious that I was also the least favored, even if no one said it out loud. Not until then. My brother, Daniel, is 4 years older than me and has always been the golden child. It wasn't even subtle. Growing up, he got the new bikes, the weekend trips, the expensive tutoring. I got hand-me-downs, leftover affection, and the "you're so independent" pep talks whenever I tried to ask for anything similar. My parents split when I was 10. Mom got custody. Dad moved out and across town. Not far, but emotionally it felt like he'd gone to Mars. He always tried to stay involved, but the guilt made him more of a background character than a co-parent. He showed up for birthdays, occasionally helped with school projects, and later, when I hit my 20s, we reconnected over coffee and taxes and life advice. Quietly. Always quietly. Daniel, meanwhile, played the part of the perfect son so well it might as well have been written for him. Ivy League business school, paid for, of course. A lavish wedding 3 years ago where I wasn't even asked to be the best man. A job Dad got him through an old friend, and when that didn't pan out, Mom bailed him out with a condo she happened to be holding on to. Nobody ever called it favoritism. They called it support. They called me self-sufficient. They said I didn't need as much help. I never really argued with it out loud. On paper, they weren't entirely wrong. I'd put myself through school on scholarships and late-night delivery shifts. I started a small graphic design company in my 20s and, after years of grinding and sleepless nights, turned it into a full-scale branding agency with actual employees and contracts. I own a modest but clean place, drive a 10-year-old car, and haven't asked them for a dime since I was 18. But success doesn't erase the sting of being overlooked. If anything, it just makes it easier for people to justify ignoring you. So when Mom sat us down that night and said, "Now that your father and I are getting older, we've decided it's time to make things clear about the future," I already had a bad feeling in my stomach. She had her lawyer's folder in one hand, her reading glasses in the other. I looked over at Dad, who was unusually quiet, his jaw clenched like he was trying not to say something. Daniel leaned back, confident, one arm draped over the back of his chair like he owned the place. Which, apparently, he soon would. Mom went on, explaining how they'd been restructuring the estate, how they wanted to avoid confusion later, and how they thought it was best to be transparent with us. "We've decided Daniel will inherit the house, the lake property, and the family trust," she said, like she was announcing tomorrow's weather. "Craig, you've done very well for yourself. You're thriving. You're independent. We don't worry about you. So this just makes the most sense." I didn't even blink. I just nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I'd gotten used to this. The rationalizations. The passive compliments that were really just excuses not to treat me equally. I stared at the cake, watching the frosting melt into the plate under the heat of the chandelier. No one said anything for a second. Daniel smiled, trying to look humble but failing. Mom looked at me like she expected a reaction. Dad kept staring at the table, and for a moment, I thought I saw shame flash across his face. The thing is, a few weeks before that meeting, I had shown Dad something. Something big. Something that would have changed everything if anyone else had seen it. But I'd asked him to keep it between us, at least for the time being. And he had. Until that moment. Later that night, after everyone had gone their separate ways, Daniel back to his condo, Mom to her garden tea on the porch, Dad found me in the hallway near the coat closet. His voice was low. His eyes were heavy. "Please," he whispered, "tell them what you showed me. I think it's time." I hesitated. I could feel the weight of everything pressing in on me. Years of being second. Years of swallowing things just to keep the peace. But when I walked back into that dining room and pulled out the folder from my bag, the same one I had once shyly handed to Dad over coffee, the room fell quiet. My brother's smile vanished first. Mom's face went pale next. Dad stood beside me, not saying a word, but his presence said enough. I flipped open the folder and laid the documents out on the table. No one moved at first. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the fridge and the whisper of the pages as I spread them slowly across the table like playing cards in a high-stakes poker game. I could feel their eyes on me, flickering between confusion and growing tension, like they weren't sure if I was bluffing or holding something nuclear. Daniel was the first to break the silence. "What is this?" he asked, his voice dipping into that smug tone he always used when he thought he was still in control. Like he already believed he'd won, and this was just a formality. A little show for attention. He was half laughing, eyes scanning the first sheet. "Craig, come on. We don't need to drag. Shut up and read," Dad cut in. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it was the kind of voice that stopped people mid-breath. Even I looked at him. I hadn't heard Dad speak like that since I was a teenager, and he caught Daniel trying to frame me for breaking the garage window. Mom adjusted her glasses, leaned in, and finally picked up the first document, a signed valuation report, then a partnership contract, then a notarized letter from a corporate lawyer. I didn't say anything. I just let them read. 3 weeks earlier, I'd finalized something big, something that had been quietly years in the making. I'd negotiated a merger between my branding agency and one of the fastest-growing digital marketing firms on the East Coast. The deal not only gave me a significant equity stake, but the resulting company had been valued at just over $25 million. Dad was the only one I'd told. I didn't want to parade it around like some sort of flex. That's never been me. But I showed him the paperwork because I wanted him to understand that I wasn't just doing fine. I had built something real, something I never once asked them to help me with. And now, faced with these papers, with the truth spelled out in clean fonts and legal signatures, Mom went still. Her fingers stopped mid-page. Daniel's smirk was gone entirely. "What is this supposed to mean?" he finally asked. But this time his voice cracked. Just slightly. The kind of crack that happens when you realize, too late, that the ground you were standing on wasn't solid. "I showed this to Dad weeks ago," I said, my voice steady. He knew, and I asked him not to say anything until I was ready. I didn't want to throw it in anyone's face. "Then why now?" Mom snapped. Her voice was sharper than I expected. Not hurt, not even embarrassed. Defensive. "Why humiliate us like this in our own home?" I blinked. "Humiliate? You just sat me down and told me my brother gets everything because I'm doing fine. You tried to justify cutting me out of the family trust like it was common sense. You've done it all my life. And now that I show you something concrete, I'm the one being unfair." Daniel stood up, looking more rattled now. "You think money makes you better than us?" "No," I said, "but it apparently made you better than me for the last 20 years. And I never said a word. That was when things truly started to unravel. The days that followed were tense. We didn't speak much after that night. Not even when we bumped into each other during a family barbecue. Mom insisted on keeping on the calendar for appearances. The quiet was worse than yelling. It was cold, measured, like they were regrouping, strategizing. I thought that would be the end of it, the awkward reveal, the emotional gut punch, the dramatic scene. I assumed, wrongly, that now that the truth was out, we'd settle into a new normal. Not close, not friendly, but honest. I underestimated them. A week later, I got a call from my bank. A flagged attempt to access one of my business accounts. Then another call, this time from a leasing office I'd worked with on a branding campaign. They were suddenly rescinding our contract, citing reputational concerns linked to rumors about my company's funding. And then the worst one, an anonymous tip to the IRS suggesting I'd falsified portions of my merger valuation. My hands went numb as I sat there in my apartment, piecing it together. I didn't have proof yet, but I had a pretty solid hunch where this was coming from. Daniel knew people in finance. He'd worked at 2 firms, both of which had ties to the local startup scene. And Mom had spent her life building connections through the country club and PDA networks that could reach into any number of businesses or organizations. They hadn't just dismissed me. They were trying to break me. I met Dad for coffee the next morning. We sat in the corner booth of a diner we used to go to when I was in high school. He didn't even touch his cup, just looked at me like he already knew what I was going to say. "I need to ask," I said. "Did you tell them anything I told you in confidence?" He shook his head, quick and firm. "No. I swear to you, Craig. Not a word." I nodded slowly. "Then it's them. They're retaliating." He exhaled hard. "I thought this might happen. That's why I made copies." I looked up. "Copies?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather folder. not unlike the one I'd used at the dinner. Inside were duplicates of everything I'd shown him. And more. Screenshots of messages Daniel had sent him over the years, filled with arrogant boasts and casual contempt. Notes Mom had written, including one particularly rough one that said, in her handwriting, "Don't give Craig too much. He'll just waste it trying to prove himself." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mouth had gone dry. That wasn't even the worst of it. Because 2 days after that, I got a knock at my office door. My assistant let me know someone had stopped by. A woman, early 30s, wearing a beige coat and holding a baby on her hip. She asked for me by name. Said it was important. I walked out front and froze the second I saw her face. "Hi," she said quietly. "You don't know me, but I know your brother." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Her eyes flicked down. "My name is Lindsay. Daniel and I dated for almost 3 years. We had a son together. He told me he'd handle everything, that your family would help. But then he ghosted us. Said he couldn't be seen with me. Said it would complicate his legacy." I stared at her. She opened her bag and pulled out documents, paternity results, texts, even a letter from a lawyer Daniel had paid to offer her hush money in exchange for signing a waiver of child support. I took it all. I didn't even know what I was going to do with it yet, but I took it. When she left, I sat back in my chair, surrounded by the weight of everything. My chest tight, my brain reeling, my hands shaking. This wasn't just favoritism. This was character assassination. This was sabotage. This was my own family trying to bury me because I didn't stay in the box they built for me. Because I didn't stay quiet. Because I didn't let them hand Daniel a crown he didn't deserve without a fight. And that was the moment it happened. The breaking point. The quiet, suffocating realization that I could never go back to who I was before that dinner. That this wasn't just about inheritance or business or even resentment. This was war. And I was done playing nice. The first real hit came 3 days after Lindsay showed up at my office. It was a Thursday morning, gray and spitting rain. I was sitting at my desk, half focused on drafting an email to a potential client in Atlanta, when my phone buzzed. Caller ID, my firm's lead counsel, Nina. No greeting, no preamble, just 6 words I'll never forget. "Craig, we have a serious problem." I leaned back in my chair, heart already racing. "Go on." "There's been a leak," she said. "Multiple documents tied to the merger, projections, early-stage term sheets, even some internal communications between your team and theirs. Someone forwarded them anonymously to the investor's legal counsel. They're now questioning if you inflated numbers to close the deal." My stomach dropped. I didn't. We were conservative with the projections. "You know that." "I know," she said. "But the optics don't look good. Especially not with the new anonymous tip to the SEC." I didn't even hear the rest. My brain shut off after SEC. By that afternoon, 2 major clients had paused contracts, pending clarification. One PR firm we were courting quietly backed out of a branding project. The new merged board scheduled an emergency session without inviting me, despite my equity stake. In my inbox? A landmine of damage control. I went home that night, kicked off my shoes, and just stood in the kitchen staring at the blank wall above the stove. It felt like my whole body had become static, that numb, white noise feeling when you're too exhausted to be angry but not tired enough to sleep. I didn't tell anyone, not even Dad. Not at first. I didn't want to give my family the satisfaction of knowing their scheme had worked. But it was working. Every day for the next week, it was something else. A whisper campaign about how I manipulated the merger. An anonymous blog post claiming I'd bullied an intern 2 years ago. Complete fabrication, but damaging enough to make a few people side-eye me. A subtle, slow drip erosion of my name, like rust on metal you can't scrub off. And the worst part? It worked. At least temporarily. 2 weeks later, the board voted to suspend my executive duties, pending further investigation. My lawyer warned me not to make public statements. Nina was doing damage control, but even she looked tired on our Zoom calls. My company, the one I built from scratch in a tiny apartment on a secondhand laptop, was slipping through my fingers. I hit rock bottom on a Wednesday. I remember it exactly. I hadn't eaten more than half a granola bar in 24 hours. I hadn't answered any personal messages, not even from Dad. I was sitting on the edge of my bathtub, still in yesterday's hoodie, watching the sink drip like it was trying to keep time. That's when my phone buzzed again. One new email. Subject, thought you'd like to see this. No sender name, just an address I didn't recognize. I opened it. Attached was a screenshot of a text exchange between Daniel and someone labeled Ruthie, Mom's friend. He was gloating, saying things like, he thought he could just strut in and embarrass us. Now he's learning what real power looks like. And another message, wait until the IRS letter hits. He'll fold. I stared at the screen, a wave of nausea crawling up my throat. But underneath the sickness, there was something else. A spark, a flicker of clarity. They weren't trying to win. They were trying to erase me. That was the night everything changed. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat down and wrote out everything I knew. Every name, every connection, every underhanded trick I suspected. I started pulling receipts, emails, calendar logs, audio memos. I combed through years of files. By dawn, I had a rough timeline, a pattern, and a motive. I made 3 calls that day. First to Dad, who picked up before the second ring. I'm in, I said. I'm not taking this lying down. Second to Lindsay, Daniel's ex, who'd left her number in case I ever needed help. She answered from what sounded like a daycare drop-off line. I told her I believed her. I told her I wanted to help her get justice, too. She didn't hesitate. Third to someone I hadn't talked to in years, Malcolm Nguyen, a data security expert I'd done a small contract for back when I was freelancing. Quiet guy, sharp, a ghost online, but a wizard with digital forensics. You need a paper trail traced? He asked after I explained. I can do better. Give me access, and I'll show you where the fingerprints are. The next 2 months were slow, methodical, and grueling. While the official investigation into me plodded along, I worked behind the scenes. Quietly, carefully, I cleared my calendar, fired my assistant to avoid leaks, operated from my home office with the blinds shut and the lights low. Malcolm found 3 document modifications on the leaked files, timestamps altered to make them look more recent. One matched the IP address of Daniel's condo complex. Another came from an account tied to Mom's nonprofit. Dad, meanwhile, went digging through the family's financial history, not for my sake, but for his own. After all, the trust had originally been set up jointly, and he wanted to understand how Mom had gotten the lawyer to exclude me without even a discussion. What he found was damning. Somehow, over the years, Mom had been moving small amounts, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, from various family investments into a private account. One that had quietly funded Daniel's condo, his failed business venture, and even part of his wedding. She had siphoned nearly $400,000 without telling Dad. He didn't confront her right away. He documented everything, had a third-party accountant verify the transfers, quietly removed his name from all joint accounts. Then he came to me and said, when the time comes, I'll back you. Fully. But while I was rebuilding from the shadows, life didn't pause. I started therapy again, virtual sessions twice a week. Not because I needed to heal, but because I needed someone to help me make sense of the mess. Someone neutral. Someone who didn't try to convince me to be the bigger person or forgive and forget. And in those sessions, I realized something. I'd spent most of my life trying to earn their love, their approval, their attention. I'd worked myself to the bone not just to succeed, but to prove I was worth something to them. But they were never going to see me. Not really. And I didn't need them to. The realization didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the betrayal or the anger. But it gave me clarity, freedom. And with that freedom came energy, the kind I hadn't felt in years. I started working out again. Not to look good, just to feel strong. I reconnected with a few friends I'd pushed away during the chaos of scaling my business. I even booked a solo trip to Montana for a week, just to get air, space, a view of something that wasn't skyscrapers or spreadsheets. And then something unexpected happened. An investor I'd once pitched to, a venture capitalist named Teresa who'd passed on my merger offer but liked my ethics, reached out. Said she'd heard, through the grapevine, that I was having a rough time. Asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We did. 1 lunch turned into 2, then 3. Eventually, she asked, "What are you working on now?" I smiled and said, "A comeback." She leaned in. "Tell me more." By the time I left that 3rd lunch, we had a handshake agreement. She'd back me if I wanted to start something new, something independent. She believed in me, not just because of what I'd built before, but because of how I'd handled its collapse. "You took a hit," she said, "and you didn't crumble. Most people would have. That's the kind of founder I bet on." So I began drafting again, not out of spite, not for revenge, for me. By the end of the 3rd month, the dust around the merger had started to settle. The board investigation concluded that while there had been concerns raised, no material fraud or ethical breach could be confirmed. I wasn't reinstated. The damage to my image had already served their purposes, but I kept my equity, which meant two things. I still had influence, and I was still in the room. Not that Mom or Daniel knew that. As far as they were concerned, I was a ghost, swept aside, buried by their maneuvering, too proud or broken to push back. And I let them think that. I fed into it. I posted less online. I skipped a few family events. I even sent a polite, detached message to Mom thanking her for the clarity she gave me that night at the dinner table. It was pure theater, and she swallowed it whole. I needed them comfortable. I needed them overconfident. Because I wasn't just planning to hit back. I was planning to make sure they never forgot the sound of it. And I knew exactly where to start. The house. Our family home wasn't just sentimental real estate. It sat on over 2 acres of land in a rapidly gentrifying suburb. When I did the math with Dad's accountant, I realized something staggering. The property alone was worth nearly $2.8 million. More if subdivided. Mom had always spoken of it like it was a crown jewel, passed from one worthy heir to the next. Which, of course, in her mind meant Daniel. But there was a problem with that. It wasn't entirely hers to give. Back when they bought it, my parents had signed a rare joint deed agreement with a survivorship clause. The clause stated that neither party could sell, gift, or bequeath the property to a third party without mutual consent, even post-divorce, unless one of them died. That clause had sat dormant for years, collecting metaphorical dust. Until now. And Mom, she'd forgotten all about it. I didn't remind her. I reminded Dad. You still own half. I told him, sliding the scanned clause across the table during a late-night visit to his condo. And she never voided this when she split. If she tries to transfer the title to Daniel without your signature, it triggers a freeze. Dad looked at it like I'd just handed him a loaded revolver. I never wanted it to come to this, he said. I know, I replied. But she made it come to you. He sat back, rubbing his temples. You really think they'd go through with it? That she'd try to sneak it through? I think she already did, I said, opening my laptop. Malcolm had been digging for weeks. With my permission, he'd tracked metadata from property registry API logs. And he found something. A series of draft title transfer documents uploaded and edited from Mom's personal laptop IP address. All dated before that dinner meeting. One even listed Daniel as the sole heir presumptive. She hadn't just made a plan. She'd already acted on it. Dad stared at the screen for a long time. Then he closed it. What do you need from me? Nothing yet, I said. But when I give the signal, I want you to stop the transfer. Cold. Publicly. He nodded. Done. Next, I reached out to Lindsay. Since our first meeting, we'd kept in touch. Not just because we had a common enemy, but because she was sharp. Strategic. After years of being ghosted and sidelined by Daniel, she'd quietly documented everything. Phone calls, bank statements, even a voice memo of him admitting he was too high profile now to deal with custody drama. I want to help you, I told her. But more than that, I want to protect your son. You both deserve more than scraps. I don't want his money, she said. I just want him legally tied. On paper. No more hiding. Then let's do it. Together, we reached out to a family law attorney who specialized in high-conflict cases. I covered the fees, anonymously, through a holding company I'd set up months ago. We filed a paternity claim and, within weeks, received court-ordered DNA results. Daniel didn't even fight it. Probably thought it wouldn't go public. He had no idea what I was preparing. Then came the wild card, Aunt Nadine. She was Mom's younger sister, estranged from the family for over a decade after a bitter inheritance dispute involving their father's fishing cabin. Back then, Mom had convinced everyone Nadine was being greedy. But when I tracked her down through an old contact at a genealogy service, long story, I got the truth. She gutted me, Nadine said on the phone. Lied about our dad's will. Told the lawyer I forged documents. I lost everything. And if you had a chance to speak up again? I asked. I'd shout. Perfect. I invited her to a small charity gala my company was sponsoring. Technically still under the merged firm's name, but I was hosting under my new brand. It wasn't a flashy event, just highbrow enough to attract attention from our local business circles. And yes, I invited my mother, and Daniel, and several of her old bridge club friends who'd bought into the narrative that I was unstable and overreacting. It was bait, and they bit hard. I still remember the look on Mom's face when she walked in and saw me at the entrance, standing beside Aunt Nadine in a sleek navy dress, glass of wine in hand, laughing softly like we were old friends. Her smile faltered. She tried to recover, but her eyes flicked between us like a deer caught in crossfire. Daniel arrived 15 minutes later, oblivious as ever. He walked up, gave me a stiff nod, and started his usual routine, bragging about some startup conference he was invited to, fishing for compliments he thought he'd earned. And then the real show began. One by one, I introduced Aunt Nadine to every person Mom had poisoned against her. I let her tell her side of the story. I nodded thoughtfully, corroborated details where needed, and watched the room slowly shift, the doubt creeping into the eyes of women who'd once echoed every word my mother said like gospel. Later, Daniel pulled me aside near the open bar. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Hosting a party," I said innocently. "What does it look like?" "You're trying to make her look bad." "I'm just giving people the truth. If it looks bad, that's not my fault." His nostrils flared. "You're pathetic. And you're a confirmed father who doesn't pay child support," I said, pulling out my phone and showing him the court filing, with his name stamped across the top. He went pale. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I won't have to," I said. "You'll do it yourself." I walked away before he could reply. The final phase of my setup came 2 weeks later, the family meeting. Mom scheduled it. Same house, same dining room, same cake, like it was some twisted tradition now. She called it an update meeting. I called it the stage. Daniel looked tired. Not just stressed, haunted. He knew something was coming, but not what. Mom was still trying to keep the upper hand. She smiled as everyone sat, papers neatly stacked beside her. "I just want to make sure we're all clear on where things stand," she began. "Given everything that's happened, I think we need to move forward with full transparency." "That's funny," Dad said, sipping his tea without looking at her. "Transparency was never really your thing." She bristled. "I beg your pardon." He didn't answer, just set down the cup and looked at me. "You ready?" I pulled the folder from my bag, a different folder this time. Thicker, heavier. And this time, I wasn't the only one holding one. Lindsay stepped into the room from the hallway, escorted by her attorney. Aunt Nadine arrived 5 minutes later, and Malcolm, in a rare public appearance, walked in holding a tablet loaded with a PowerPoint and timestamps. Mom stood up. "What is this? What's going on?" I looked at her, at Daniel, at the house I grew up in, the very room where she tried to write me out of everything. "This," I said, "is the truth." And then I opened the folder. For a moment, all you could hear in the room was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock behind Dad's chair. My mother's mouth hung open slightly, not in shock, but in the sort of stunned disbelief that people get when they realize they've lost control and the rules have changed mid-game. Daniel was staring at Lindsay like she was a ghost from a dream he swore he'd buried. And Dad? He just leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and waited. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "This folder," I said, sliding it slowly toward the center of the table, "contains a timeline of every attempt made to sabotage my career. Dates, times, IP addresses, password resets from Daniel's network, a false IRS tip that can be traced to a device in this house, correspondence between Mom and her bridge club, which reads more like a coordinated smear campaign than casual gossip." I paused and looked directly at Daniel. "There are screenshots, Dan. Metadata. Malcolm here." I gestured to my friend by the door, verified it all. "Your digital fingerprints are all over it. Yours and Mom's." Mom scoffed. "Craig, this is ridiculous. You're trying to humiliate us with wild accusations because you couldn't handle a simple estate decision. Right?" I said, my voice calm. "Let's talk about that decision." Dad reached into his folder and pulled out a crisp, notarized document. The original survivorship deed from when he and Mom bought the house in 1989. "You tried to transfer the property to Daniel without my knowledge," he said, turning to her. "That's illegal. I've already filed a motion to freeze the title." Mom paled. "You wouldn't." "I already did," he cut her off. "The house is locked in probate now. Nothing can be done with it until both parties agree. And I don't agree." Daniel, looking between us like a cornered animal, blurted out, "This is insane. You're all trying to gang up on us. You're ruining this family." "No," Lindsay said sharply, stepping forward with her attorney. "You did that when you abandoned your son." She set a small photo on the table. A toddler with Daniel's unmistakable eyes, smiling up from a pumpkin patch. Court-ordered paternity confirmed you're the father. You signed a letter offering hush money to avoid legal responsibility. You manipulated me, lied to my face, and when I refused to disappear, you cut off communication. Well, not anymore. We filed for full custody review and child support retroactive to the date of birth. Daniel went rigid. You can't do that. Lindsay's lawyer calmly slid a stack of papers across the table. We already did. Mom stood, trying to take control. All right, enough. Craig, if this is your idea of revenge, you've made your point. What more do you want? An apology? I turned to her. No. I want you to watch as everything you built on lies and favoritism crumbles. I want you to sit in the house you tried to steal from me and realize it's no longer yours to give. I want Daniel to pay for his son, not just financially, but by being forced to be the father he's never had the guts to be. She laughed, bitter, defensive. You think you've won something? You're still alone. Just a bitter little man obsessed with getting even. No, I said, standing now, my voice steady. I'm not alone. And I wasn't. Because over the past 4 months, I'd built something stronger than revenge. I'd built a network. People who'd been wronged. People they stepped on. Employees Daniel had mistreated. Tenants Mom had manipulated through her nonprofit's rental holdings. Friends of mine they'd dismissed, badmouthed, underestimated. They came forward, quietly at first, then louder. I launched a foundation 3 days later. The Glassroots Initiative, named after the idea that people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Funded by my own holdings and matched by investors like Teresa, who happily contributed after hearing how I was framed, it was a startup incubator for young entrepreneurs with no family support. People like me, back then. We offered mentorship, seed funding, brand development, and a team of legal advisors who specialized in shielding founders from predatory investors, like Daniel used to be. When the launch made local business news, the article included a single line that sent shockwaves through my family. Founded by Craig Hemsworth, former co-founder of Maven Brand and current majority stakeholder in Emergent Creative Holdings. Because what Mom and Daniel hadn't known was that I never lost control of my company. While I'd been ousted as CEO, I had negotiated my equity stake into a new holding firm. I never left. I simply stepped sideways. And when Teresa and a few other sympathetic board members learned the full truth of the smear campaign, they forced a shareholder vote to reinstate me, not as CEO, but as chairman. Daniel lost every remaining contact he had in our industry within days. And Mom, the fallout was more personal. Dad filed a financial misappropriation claim on the family trust. With evidence from the accountant he'd quietly hired, he froze the remaining assets pending audit. Over $900,000 that Mom had discreetly moved into gifts and unregistered distributions to Daniel over the past 5 years. She claimed it was helping a struggling child. The audit board called it fraudulent misallocation of generational wealth. She lost control of the trust. Her name was removed from its oversight. Dad restructured the payouts into equal 50-50 shares, one to me, one to a custodial account for Daniel's son, to be administered by Lindsay until he turned 18. Mom moved out of the family house 6 weeks later, citing emotional stress. She now lives in a small rental across town. Daniel tried to crash with her, but eventually gave up and moved into a friend's basement. I never celebrated. No champagne. No post gloating online. No, I told you so family text. I just got back to work. Because that's who I've always been. Quiet, steady, relentless. Dad and I are closer than ever. We talk every weekend. He's even started mentoring some of the kids in my foundation. Sometimes I catch him smiling at nothing, like a man who finally, after all these years, said what needed to be said. As for Lindsay, we're not dating, in case you're wondering. But we've become friends. Real ones. Her son's birthday is next month, and she asked if I'd come. I said yes. I bought him a telescope. And every now and then, I pass by the old family house, the lawn trimmed, the porch light still flickering like always. It's empty now. No one wants it. Not anymore. And I smile. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying what they have. It's becoming everything they told you you'd never be. And making sure they have no part in it. It was supposed to be a celebration. That's what they kept calling it, anyway. A celebration of life. A tribute to the man who held us all together. a joyous evening full of laughter and memories. But even as they spoke those words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I'm Fred, I'm 29, and I've always been the quiet one in the family, the background guy. As my cousin Mark once joked during a barbecue, beer in hand and a smirk on his face. I laughed along, sure, but I felt that one. I always do. Growing up, I was the kid who never made trouble. I didn't rebel, didn't shout. I just kept to myself. I did well in school, got a job right out of college in finance, and slowly built up a modest but peaceful life. I rent a decent apartment. I've got a rescue dog named Stanley, and I spend most of my evenings with a book or a game on mute. It's quiet, and honestly, it suits me. My family never really understood that. They're loud, dramatic, always in each other's business. My mom's side in particular, chaotic energy wrapped in pearls and forced smiles. Aunt Clara is the ringleader, my mom's older sister. If you've ever seen someone throw a baby shower and make it about herself, you know the type. Clara has 3 kids, 2 divorces, and a desperate need to control everything around her. She's one of those people who uses the phrase, just being honest, right before saying something cruel. Grandpa, my mom and Clara's dad, was the only reason I ever showed up to family events. He was old school, but kind. One of those men who showed love in quiet ways. He taught me how to play chess, how to drive a stick shift, and how to cook steak just right. He didn't say much, but when he did, it mattered. He never raised his voice, and yet somehow everyone listened when he spoke. I always felt like he saw me, even when no one else did. When he passed away 2 months ago at 89, I was the one who sat beside him through the night at the hospital. Just me and him and the humming machines. His will was simple. He didn't leave behind much, just a small house, some savings, a few family heirlooms. No drama, surprisingly. What caught me off guard was the note he left me. Just a short letter tucked into his chest set. It said, "You were always the one who listened. Don't let them turn this into something ugly." At first, I didn't understand what he meant, but it started to make more sense when Clara took over the planning for the celebration dinner. "It's going to be beautiful," she told everyone. Black tie, catered, slideshow, speeches. Just the way Dad would have wanted. Except, he wouldn't have. Grandpa didn't like big shows. He hated speeches. He always said funerals should be small and honest. But nobody pushed back, except me. When I voiced my concerns on the family group chat, I got ignored. I tried again. "Are we sure Grandpa would have wanted this kind of dinner?" Clara replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. Mom texted me privately later. "Just let her have this. You know how she gets." I thought maybe I was reading too much into it. So I offered to help. I said I could pitch in for the venue or assist with the slideshow. Clara replied, "Oh, sweetie, you don't need to worry about all that. Just show up and try not to wear one of your weird minimalist suits, okay?" Everyone laughed at that. Still, I kept quiet. That's what I do. I sent over some old pictures of Grandpa from my phone, contributed a few stories when my cousin Lily asked for memories, and stayed out of it. The dinner was scheduled for a Saturday evening. A rented hall near Clara's neighborhood. 50 guests. Assigned seating. Dress code. She even hired a photographer. About a week before the event, I stopped by my mom's place to drop off some books she had lent me. As I stepped inside, I heard voices from the living room. Her, Clara, and Lily. I paused in the hallway, not meaning to eavesdrop, but something about the tone made me freeze. "He's going to be there, right?" Clara was saying. "Fred?" "Yeah. I mean, unless he suddenly grows a backbone," my mom replied, and they all laughed. Then Clara said something that made my stomach drop. "Good. Because the best part of the slideshow is the punchline. You have to see it. Lily edited it so perfectly. We go from all these serious tributes and emotional stuff, and then boom. That picture of Fred asleep at the family reunion with the ketchup packet on his head. The whole room is going to lose it." They all started laughing again. "That one's gold," Lily said. "We end the slideshow with it. And then your speech wraps it up by thanking every branch of the family tree, even the sleepy ones." I felt like I'd been slapped. I didn't even remember that picture. And it wasn't just the photo, it was the fact that I was the setup. The gag. The joke to send the room out on a high note. In a tribute to Grandpa. I walked back to my car without knocking. My heart was racing, and I couldn't believe how quickly the warmth I'd felt toward this whole thing was unraveling. I sat in the driver's seat for 10 minutes, staring at the wheel. Grandpa wouldn't have wanted this. He hated cruelty disguised as comedy. He hated fake speeches and forced smiles. I kept hearing his voice in my head. Don't let them turn this into something ugly. That's when the idea began to form. At first, it was just a bitter little fantasy. What if I didn't show up? What if I sent them all a message that said, "Good luck with your punchline"? But it wasn't enough. Because I wasn't just upset. I was humiliated. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about the slideshow. This had been my whole life in miniature. Being the afterthought, the footnote, the easy target, the quiet guy they could always count on to show up, stay out of the way, and laugh it off when they mocked him. So I stopped laughing, and I started planning. The hall was booked in my name. That was their first mistake. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and sat down with my laptop, scrolling through the confirmation email from the venue. My name was right there in bold: Frederick A. Langston, primary contact, and billing. It wasn't even that they forgot. Clara had used my credit card. Let me explain. A few weeks before the planning started, Clara called me, completely out of the blue. We hadn't spoken one-on-one in months. She laid it on thick, told me she appreciated how close I was to Grandpa, how I'd always been the thoughtful one, how much it would mean to the family if I helped cover the initial deposit until everyone else could pitch in later. I remember feeling stunned, not because she asked, but because she actually said thank you. Clara never said thank you. And even though it sounded fishy, I caved. She promised everyone would split it, swore she just needed a placeholder card. It was $600 to hold the venue. I didn't even blink. Except now, looking at this email, it was clear no one had ever switched the contact information or added their names. This whole event, the black-tie dinner, the decorations, the slideshow, the photographer, was attached to me. So I started digging. I emailed the venue, pretending to confirm a few details for peace of mind. The coordinator, a sweet woman named Jenny, replied with a full itemized list: final headcount submitted, menu selections, decor arrangements, and the total invoice. $2,740. All charged to my card. They never even asked. I sat in stunned silence for a few seconds, rereading the email. Not only had they planned to humiliate me in front of 50 people, they also decided I should foot the bill for it. No one had said a word about the rest of the cost. I hadn't signed off on it. I hadn't seen a single update. But the bill was paid. They'd used my card for everything. And then I remembered something even worse. My email was also the one linked to the booking portal, which meant every automated confirmation, every update, every change, they'd all been going to my inbox. And I hadn't even noticed. Because Clara had changed the sender name to something generic like Event Hall Notifications. I'd been deleting them for weeks, assuming they were spam. I could feel something boiling in my chest, a kind of heat that made my hands shake slightly. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry. Really, really angry. But still, a part of me hesitated. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was some explanation. Maybe Mom didn't know Clara had used my card. Maybe they were going to reimburse me after the dinner. Maybe this was all just a big misunderstanding. I needed answers. So I called Mom. "Hey, sweetheart," she answered like nothing was wrong. "Hey, quick question," I said, keeping my tone even. "Did Clara tell you she used my card to pay for everything?" There was a pause. Not long. Just enough to confirm everything. "Well, she said you offered to help." I offered to cover the deposit, $600. Not the entire event. More silence. She didn't mention. "Mom, the venue charged me over $2,000. And then, in a voice so casual I felt the ground shift. "Oh, well, you make good money, right?" It was like she had reached through the phone and slapped me. My own mother. The woman who used to pack notes in my lunchbox and remind me to wear sunscreen. Now she was brushing off a four-figure charge like it was spare change. Like I owed it to them. I hung up. No yelling. No explanation. I just pressed the red button and sat there, staring at the wall as Stanley rested his head on my knee, sensing something was wrong. That was the moment. That was the breaking point. Every repressed feeling from years of being sidelined, dismissed, used, it all snapped loose. I thought about the birthday dinners where they forgot to order something I liked. The family vacations where I was stuck on the couch while the cousins got beds. The holidays where Clara's kids were treated like royalty and I was the one cleaning up plates. I thought about Grandpa's letter. "Don't let them turn this into something ugly." Too late, Grandpa. It was already ugly. But I could make it honest. The next few days, I played along. I stayed silent in the group chat. Replied with a polite, looking forward to it, when Lily asked if I'd be at the venue early. But behind the scenes, I was making calls. I canceled my card and disputed every charge. I spoke to Jenny at the venue and explained what happened. She was furious on my behalf. Apparently, Clara had called from a blocked number and impersonated me to approve the upgrades. When I told Jenny I wanted to cancel everything, she hesitated. Fred, I'd be happy to refund you what I can. But the event is this Saturday. That's really short notice. Is the cancellation policy strict? Technically, no. Because it's under your name and you're the one requesting it, I can cancel it entirely. But that would mean no venue, no dinner, no anything, she said carefully. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the slideshow. The punchline. 50 people, dressed to the nines, expecting filet mignon and sentimental speeches, only to find a locked hall and silence. I thought about Clara's smug voice, my mother's indifference, and then I imagined the group chat lighting up with confusion. Aunt Clara frantically calling, Mom texting, Fred, where are you? And me, far away, comfortable, watching it all unfold. I looked back at Jenny's email. Let's cancel it, I said. You sure? Absolutely. And just like that, it was done. But I wasn't finished. I booked a hotel room that afternoon. Somewhere nice. Not too far, just far enough to be out of reach. I didn't want to be home when the call started. I packed a small bag, arranged for Stanley to stay with my neighbor, she adores him, and turned off notifications from the family group chat. Saturday came fast. I checked into the hotel around noon. The lobby was quiet, peaceful. No screaming kids, no buzzing phones, just soft music and the faint smell of eucalyptus. I took a long shower, put on my favorite hoodie, ordered room service, watched half a movie, then scrolled through social media like it was any other day. At 6:10 p.m., the first call came. Clara. I let it ring. Then another. Mom. Ignored. Then Lily. Then my cousin Owen. Then Mark. Each one sent straight to voicemail. At 6:43 p.m., a message popped up from Clara. Fred, where are you? The doors are locked. I smiled. Then Mom. People are standing around. This is embarrassing. And finally, at 6:52 p.m., the best one of all. Aunt Clara, unhinged and furious. Fred, what did you do? Everyone's outside. Your grandfather would be ashamed. I waited 5 minutes. Let the chaos simmer. Then I replied with one sentence. Ask yourself why 50 people are standing outside a locked hall. And then I blocked her. The silence after that? It was glorious. The silence didn't last. By Sunday morning, my phone was vibrating like it had a pulse. Even with half the family blocked, messages trickled in through every app I'd ever used. Facebook, Instagram. Even an old email from 2014 suddenly came back to life with a subject line from my cousin Owen that simply read, You've gone too far. I didn't open it. Instead, I ordered breakfast from room service, pancakes and black coffee, and sat by the window in my robe while the world frothed with indignation on the other side of the glass. Downstairs, a wedding party was checking out. The air was clean. The coffee was hot. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt weightless. Still, I knew the fallout was coming. I wasn't stupid. The first real consequence arrived that afternoon, a voicemail from my boss. Hey Fred, just checking in. I got a call from someone named Clara who said you might be going through a personal crisis. Sounded dramatic. She mentioned family tension and implied you might be unstable right now. I told her I hadn't seen any signs of that here, but let me know if everything's okay. Unstable. That word made my skin crawl. Clara had called my job. She'd crossed a line I didn't even think she'd notice, let alone leap over. And suddenly, that fragile calm I'd been enjoying was gone. I called my boss back immediately, explained everything. To his credit, he listened. He even laughed at some of it. Families are wild, man, he said. You do what you need to do. But still, the damage was done. Clara had started a whisper campaign. By Monday, 3 extended relatives had posted cryptic Facebook statuses about betrayals within the family. My mom, who had stayed eerily quiet since Saturday, finally texted me. You humiliated us. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. No apology. No recognition that they'd used me. Just disappointment. But here's the thing about rock bottom. You find out who you really are down there. And I was done being their punchline. So I cut the rope. I logged out of the family Facebook group. Left the family chat. Blocked every number that had made me feel small in the past year. The hardest was Mom's. I stared at her name for 10 full minutes before I tapped block. My hand trembled, but I did it. Then I powered off my phone and went outside for the first time in what felt like forever. The hotel was near a coastal trail, windy and quiet, the kind of place Grandpa would have loved. I walked for an hour, maybe two, and somewhere between the crashing waves and the smell of salt and eucalyptus, I felt something crack loose inside me. I'd spent my whole life trying to keep the peace, to smooth things over, to be the good one, the quiet, dependable one who showed up and didn't complain and let the jokes roll off his back. But what good had that done me? They still saw me as expendable, as background noise, as the kid with the ketchup packet on his head. Even after Grandpa's death, they couldn't give me dignity. So I decided to stop earning theirs. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop. No distractions, no internet, just a blinking cursor and a glass of wine by my side. I didn't know exactly what I was writing. Maybe a journal, maybe a letter to Grandpa. But once I started, I couldn't stop. Everything poured out: memories, guilt, anger, pride. I wrote until 2 a.m., and when I finally closed my laptop, my fingers ached and my eyes were burning, but my mind was clear. I slept like a stone. In the days that followed, I started building something new, quietly, slowly, with no grand declarations. I extended my hotel stay by a week, used some PTO I'd been hoarding, canceled a few meetings, took Stanley on long walks. Every morning, I wrote, not just about my family, about me, about what I wanted, about who I actually was when I wasn't trying to shrink myself to fit other people's expectations. And then something strange happened. The writing started to feel good, not just cathartic, purposeful, like I wasn't just venting, I was building, crafting something real. By the end of that week, I had 40 pages. I emailed them to a former professor of mine who taught nonfiction storytelling and had always encouraged me to write more. I wasn't expecting anything, maybe a nice job or keep going. Instead, he called me. "Fred," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You have something here." I blinked. "Really? Really? This is raw, honest, sharp. If you're willing to expand it, I think it could be something more. Something publishable." And just like that, a seed was planted. I extended my stay again, switched to a cheaper hotel, and settled into a rhythm. Morning walks, coffee shops in the afternoon, writing late into the night. My job was remote-friendly, and I adjusted my hours to work half days while I rebuilt myself the other half. Each passing week brought more clarity. I hired a financial advisor and untangled the mess left by Clara's stunt. Yes, I got all the money back. I signed up for therapy and started unpacking more than just this incident. Years of quiet neglect and internalized guilt that had warped the way I saw myself. I even joined a local writing group where I read parts of my manuscript out loud for the first time. Every time someone nodded, laughed, or teared up, I felt like I was reclaiming something. And through it all, I stayed silent toward my family. They didn't deserve access to this version of me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But that didn't stop them from trying. Clara, ever the puppet master, began damage control. She sent an apology email filled with backhanded compliments and veiled jabs. "I guess we underestimated how sensitive you are. We never meant to make you the butt of the joke. It was just meant to lighten the mood. Grandpa always loved humor, didn't he? No mention of the stolen money. No regret for calling my job. Just an attempt to rewrite the narrative." I didn't respond. Lily reached out next. Hers was better, softer. She admitted she should have spoken up. Said she got swept up in the planning and wasn't proud of how things turned out. She didn't beg for forgiveness. Just acknowledged her part and said she hoped I was doing okay. I didn't respond to her either. Not yet. But I didn't block her. Weeks passed. My book grew. My world got quieter and stronger. And then, one night, I opened my inbox to a message that made my chest ache. It was from my mother. No subject line. No pleasantries. Just, "Your silence is hurting me. I don't know how to fix this." I stared at it for a long time. Because in some twisted way, that one line summed up our relationship. She didn't ask why I was hurt. She didn't acknowledge what she'd done. She just centered her pain and asked me to fix her discomfort. And for once, I didn't feel guilty about not replying. Because I wasn't here to fix anyone anymore. I was here to build myself. To heal. To rise. And when I finally stood at the edge of the coast again, weeks later, wind in my face and Stanley at my side, I thought of Grandpa. I thought of how he always taught me to move deliberately, to think before reacting, to choose dignity over drama. But I also thought of what he said in that final note. Don't let them turn this into something ugly. I hadn't. I'd turned it into something true. If there's one thing I've learned from watching my family implode from a distance, it's this. People like Clara don't apologize because they're sorry. They apologize when they think it'll reset the board. Reset their control. Reset your role. Reset the illusion that they still run the show. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. And that meant if I wanted to do this right, not just to walk away, but to walk away with the last word, I had to play by a different set of rules. No yelling. No drama. Just precision. The book helped sharpen that instinct. By the time I reached page 200, I knew I wasn't just venting into a void. I was writing something they would read someday. Maybe not as an audience. Maybe not with pride or joy, but with the kind of frozen, stomach-sinking realization that every smug comment, every eye roll, every joke made at my expense had been immortalized. But that wasn't enough. Because I didn't want them to just feel it later. I wanted them to see it live. I wanted them to look around and realize the world had shifted and I wasn't standing where they left me. So I made a plan. It started small, quiet, calculated moves designed to build leverage. Not over them directly. I wasn't about to become Clara 2.0, but over the narrative they'd built. The one where I was just the awkward cousin with a laptop, the doormat, the man-child who couldn't take a joke. I started with the venue. Jenny, the manager I'd worked with during the cancellation fiasco, was still furious about how things went down. She'd seen Clara's manipulation firsthand and had gone out of her way to refund every cent she could, including a cleaning fee she admitted probably wasn't your fault. I reached out to her again, but this time for something else. Hey Jenny, I know this might sound odd, I wrote, but do you happen to have security footage from that Saturday evening? She replied within an hour. Still archived for now. You're thinking of using it for what? A refund dispute. I told her the truth. I said it might be part of a book I was writing. I kept it vague, professional, polite. She sent me 2 short clips and a few screenshots. The video didn't have audio, but it didn't need it. The footage showed exactly what I'd pictured, 50 overdressed people milling around a locked door. Clara on her phone, pacing. My mother standing in heels, arms crossed. People checking their watches, whispering, frowning. At one point, Owen kicked the door. Then Lily showed up, tried to talk to Clara, and finally sat down on the curb looking absolutely done with everything. The visual metaphor alone was art. I clipped it, saved it, and filed it away. Not for the book, yet, but for something else down the line. Next came the book itself. After months of drafting, editing, and refining, I finally sent it to 3 beta readers outside of my writing group. Real people with no connection to me. 2 former professors, 1 freelance editor from a Reddit writing community. Their feedback was humbling and energizing all at once. This is part memoir, part firebomb, one of them wrote. But in the best way. I've never read a family story that felt so personal and yet so universal. That same week, the editor from Reddit emailed me again. Fred, I don't know if this is in your plans, but if you're open to self-publishing, I have contacts. Real ones. This is a story people will devour. At first, I wasn't sure. It felt big, public, exposing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want this story to rot in a folder. I didn't need it to be a bestseller or a viral sensation. I just needed it to exist, to be real and undeniable and out of their control. So I said yes. And then I started planning the launch. But not like most authors do. I wasn't booking interviews or pitching to agents. I was plotting a reveal, an invitation, to the very people who thought they'd buried me under their laughter. I decided the book's release date would be Grandpa's birthday. It was poetic, clean, a day the family always marked with oversugared cake and forced phone calls. Now, it would belong to something real. I spent the next month preparing. I ordered advanced author copies with a minimalist matte cover. No flashy colors, no gimmicks. Just a single white chess piece against a black background, the king. I made a website, set up an anonymous email for press inquiries, wrote a press release that framed the book as a quiet meditation on grief, family power dynamics, and generational neglect. It was classy, honest, clean. And then, finally, I did the thing I'd been preparing for since the moment I heard Clara laugh in that living room. I mailed them copies, one by one, personalized, monogrammed packaging with wax seals. No sender name, Just a simple message card tucked into each. This is what you made. Fred. I sent one to Clara, one to my mom, one to each of my cousins, even the spineless ones. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. Clara's arrived first. I could tell from the silence. She went dark on social media. Her Facebook page, normally filled with wine memes and minion gifs, was scrubbed for 3 days. Then a new post appeared. Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. Not every memoir is based in fact. She didn't name me, but the message was clear. The book had hit her like a truck. Mom's reaction came next. She didn't post anything, didn't write, didn't call. But my phone rang one night at 1:13 a.m. I stared at it for a full minute, her name glowing in the dark. Then I silenced it and went back to sleep. The next morning, she sent a message. Why would you do this to us? I didn't reply, because they had spent years acting like I didn't matter, like I was furniture in the background of their louder lives. But now they had to read me, page by page, chapter by chapter, line by line. They had to see themselves through my eyes. No spin, no edits, just truth. It was the slowest revenge I could imagine. By the time the book officially launched, I was already 4 months removed from the family I used to orbit like a cold little moon. The pre-orders trickled in first. Members of the writing group, friends of friends who had heard whispers about a memoir that pulls no punches. Then the reviews started showing up, slowly at first, but they were like drops of water on stone, quiet, persistent, and impossible to ignore. Raw and surgical, like someone calmly describing a train crash they survived. You don't have to know this family to know this family. You just have to have ever been dismissed, overlooked, or used by people who say they love you. I bought this because the author posted anonymously about it. I stayed because I couldn't look away. Some readers messaged me, thanking me for putting into words what they had never been able to. A few said they cried. One woman told me she gave it to her therapist. Another said she mailed it to her sister with no explanation and hasn't spoken to her since. I hadn't expected any of that. Honestly, I figured the book would make a small wave, maybe help me close this chapter and move on. But something about it hit people where they lived. And the most surprising part? It sold. Not millions, but thousands. Enough to reach the top of a niche chart on Amazon. Enough for a modest publisher to reach out with an offer to reprint and distribute more broadly under their nonfiction imprint. And that's when the real fallout began. The publisher, of course, wanted to promote it. They asked for interviews, podcasts, social clips, bookstore signings. I told them I'd do limited press under a pseudonym. Just initials, just voice, no face. They agreed. The first podcast dropped on a Wednesday, and by Friday, the family had completely lost their minds. The group chat I'd left months ago, screenshots made their way back to me through Lily, the only cousin who hadn't fully sided with Clara. It was pure chaos. Clara, Fred's spreading lies on the internet. Owen, that book's going to follow our name forever. Do you even realize that? Mom, I told you this would happen if you pushed him too far. That last one surprised me. Mom wasn't defending me. She was blaming them. Not apologizing, not regretting her own actions, but finally admitting I hadn't snapped without reason. A crack in the mask. It got worse for Clara before it got better. Apparently, several of her wine club friends bought the book without realizing who wrote it, until they hit the scene at the tribute dinner and recognized themselves in the chaos outside that locked hall. I never used anyone's full names in the manuscript, but the context was enough. The woman who screamed at the valet, the man who threw up on the hedges, the aunt pacing in heels and shouting into her phone. They knew, and Clara knew they knew. According to Lily, Clara tried to spin it as a fictionalization, a satirical exaggeration written by an unstable family member who had a grudge. But she couldn't get away from the receipts, the screenshots, the footage, and most damning of all, the fact that everyone believed it. Because deep down, they all knew she was capable of every word. One by one, her social groups started to shrink. A few unfriended her. Some stopped replying to her event invites. Her reputation, the thing she'd guarded like a crown jewel for years, began to rot in public view. Mom called me again during this time. Left a voicemail that was half sigh, half monologue. I read it. The whole thing. I didn't realize how much I'd hurt you. I thought I was doing the best I could. But maybe my best was just what I needed, not what you did. I didn't call her back. But I didn't block her either. I'd already said everything I needed to say. On paper. In print. Forever. In late spring, I got a speaking invitation from a university panel on narrative nonfiction. They offered a flight, hotel, and a modest honorarium. I accepted. That night, I stood in front of a small audience of students and writers, reading from the chapter called The Ketchup Packet. The room went still. No laughter. No giggles. Just a quiet kind of electricity. At the end, a woman in the front row raised her hand. "Do they know?" she asked. "Your family." I nodded. "They know." "What did they say?" "Doesn't matter," I said. They had their turn. This was mine. Afterward, a professor came up and shook my hand. "You know," he said, "there's a whole generation of people who are going to see their own families in your story. Not just the dysfunction, but the reclamation. You made something ugly into something honest." Those words stuck with me, because I realized in that moment, the revenge had already happened. Not in the petty sense. Not in making Clara cry or making my mother squirm. That was incidental. The real revenge was that I didn't need them to change for me to rise. They didn't get to define me anymore. They didn't get to clip my sentences or reduce me to a joke or bury me under their expectations. I had written my way out. I had rewritten myself. And by the end of the year, I was living in a new city, one I dreamed about moving to for years but never had the courage to try. I signed with an agent. Started outlining my second book. Adopted a second dog so Stanley wouldn't be lonely. I built a life, not in rebellion, but in release. I never saw Clara again. I imagine she still seethes every time someone mentions the word memoir. Good. Let her. Mom and I eventually exchanged a few emails. Tentative ones. Careful. I don't know if we'll ever be close again. But at least now, she meets me where I am, not where she thinks I should be. As for Grandpa, I visit his grave once a year. I bring a chess piece, the king, and I leave it on the headstone. Just for him. The last time I went, I sat under the old maple tree nearby, opened my copy of the book, and read aloud from the final paragraph. The words I'd spent months perfecting. The words that closed the loop. They tried to make me the punchline. But I learned to write the setup, deliver the line, and walk off stage with the mic still warm in my hand. And then I closed the book, looked out across the quiet grass, and whispered the only line that still mattered. I win.